صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For all of our marhumin, and for all of those migrants who have been passing away in the last week, especially those who have drowned, please recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for their souls, and for all of our marhumin, inshallah. Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our fourth session in our new series as a commentary and analysis on one of the most eminent supplications in our school of thought, known as Hadith al-Kisa. And in the first few sessions, we have looked at the following. Number one, we looked at why we are going to study Hadith al-Kisa. In that, it is one of the great traditions and underpins and underscores much of our theological understanding, and so gives to us an understanding of the Quran, the relationship between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt, angels. It provides us a reason for our existence. And so, because so many of our programs begin with this particular supplication, it is necessary for us to take a deeper look at it, analyze it, and be able to extract the fruits therein. We also stated that such an action tackles head-on one of the greatest challenges within our community today, and that is the act of ritualization. In that, too often, when we come to an act within our community, often it has become ritualized, where the genuine depth of that matter, the ma'rifah, the cognizance of that matter, often is taken away because of the ritualization, the lack of appreciation for the matter at hand. And so it is important that if our community continues to evolve, one of the aspects must be to defeat the wave of ritualization that has overcome us. Number two, we looked at the chain of narration and found that the opening narrators, until the narrators that provide us even the commentary today, there is an unbroken chain of narrators from Her Eminence Fatima al-Zahra salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha to Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, one of the greatest companions of Rasulullah, all the way until the great Maraji of our own era. And we find that in the chain of narration, all of our greatest scholars from one to another are narrators of this particular hadith, back to back. That provides us with a number of lessons. Number one, it provides us with a great deal of certainty that these were the actual words of Zahra alayhi salam, and this was the actual event that took place 1400 years ago. For if you and I are going to base our religion, our theology, our foundation on something as explicit as Hadith al-Kisa, it is necessary for you and I to have confidence that this was the event that took place. We also find that if Zahra alayhi salam, an infallible amongst the 14 greats, has given this narration to someone like Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari to narrate and to carry on, it suggests to you and I that if we become a purified soul in the way of Allah, you and I can elevate ourselves to such a position that an Imam alayhi salam or someone from amongst the 14 ma'asumeen may have confidence in you and I to hand over matters of the religion to them. Number 3, last week we took a brief analysis of the biography of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. In that, he is amongst the greatest of companions. The school of Ahl al-Bayt, the Shia Ithna Ashariya Imamiyya school of thought, is often criticized for not having care or concern of the Sahaba. This is not true. We venerate the Sahaba. In fact, if you notice within Ziyarat Waritha, just now in Ziyarat Warith, we have a salutation to those people who are Ansar of Rasulullah. Salutation to the Ansar of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Salutation to the Ansar of Fatima al-Zahra, and so on and so forth. And so amongst the greatest of those is Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, one of the eldest, in fact the eldest of all companions to have passed away only 2 years before the birth of our 6th Imam, Jaffer al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. We mentioned in brief some of his great accomplishments. He is someone who partook in 18 of the battles with Rasulullah, was with Amir al-Mu'mineen in Siffin, was someone who narrated Ziyarat Amin Allah, someone who was the first individual to go on the Ziyarat of Arba'iniyya, and so on and so forth. And we also find that again, not only was he someone entrusted with this great hadith by Zahra alayhi salam, Rasulullah entrusted the salutation to Imam al-Baqir salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Tonight we conclude our discussion on the opening line of Hadith al-Kisa, an Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, an Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. Jabir narrates from Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. And so we want to look at what do the scholars say about this one particular line, and what is one of the pragmatic lessons for us in our community that we can take away. As we stated, we will be using 2 commentaries, primarily this one from His Eminence Imam Muhammad Hussein al-Shirazi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, one of the greatest maraja of our era, who wrote 1400 books. And one of those is this one in particular, Min Fiqh al-Zahra, this particular chapter, Hadith al-Kisa, the commentary of Hadith al-Kisa. His Eminence, Sayyid al-Marja al-Shirazi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, starts this discussion by stating there are 6 headline issues that we can take from this opening line, an Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, an Fatima al-Zahra, that Jabir narrates from Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. He preambles this with a very important point, a very important discussion. Assuming we believe this narration to be sahih, which we do, as we highlighted the chain of narration in the second discourse. Assuming this hadith is sahih, coming from the tongue of an infallible, a purified source, if this is a narration that describes the acts of 5 grand individuals of infallible nature, and that of the Archangel Jibreel, and that of Allah Almighty Himself upon His throne, when we look at this particular narration, every aspect that we look at is part and parcel of the sunnah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This is very important, because the style of narration and commentary that Sayyid al-Marja al-Shirazi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi takes is to analyze every single aspect of the Hadith of Kisa, and to break it down and to observe that if this is the event that occurred, or this is the aspect of the event that occurred, we can take that this is a sunnah of Ahlul Bayt that is either something obligatory or something that is mustahab to perform in our own particular lives. The Quran says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Rasulullah does not speak of his own whim. Rather, it is naught but inspiration given to him. It is upon this basis that we divide the sunnah into three. What is there? There is qawl, there are the statements of Ahlul Bayt, fi'l, the actions of Ahlul Bayt, and there is the takrirat, there is the implicit or the tacit approvals of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And so based upon these three, we are able to extrapolate that this is the best and perfect way to act, because they have set the example par excellence for you and I to take into our own lives. Based upon that, His Eminence Sayyid al-Marja al-Shirazi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi states there are 6 things that we can take from the line عن جابر ابن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء صلوات الله وسلامه عليها. What are those aspects? Number 1, and this is very important, look at the way Sayyid al-Marja analyzes this particular hadith. The mindset, the direction of approach towards this particular analysis. Number 1, now some of these may be obvious, but it provides us with a framework in which to start our discourse on. Number 1, he says, istihab al-riwaya. It is permissible to have riwayat, to have narrations. The fact that we have a narration, an Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, an Fatima alayhi salam, this says it is mustahab. It is recommended to narrate discourse of what happened. Now, one may say, well, of course it's good to narrate what happened. But if you remember in your history, there were certain khulafa immediately after Rasulullah that prohibited the narrations and prohibited the discourse of what happened to Rasulullah. If you have one caliph usurping, of course, but if you have one caliph that states us narrating what happened to Rasulullah, what happened in the history of Uhud or Hunayn or Khandaq or Ghadir or wherever, if you have someone of that position prohibiting narrations, then we find here the opposite perspective from the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. It is recommended for you to narrate a hadith. Number 1. Number 2, it is permissible for a woman to narrate hadith. And we're going to explore this in some detail for the rest of the discourse, inshallah. We will come back to it. But number 2, عن Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari عن Fatima alayhi salam. That he gets this from whom? Zahra alayhi salam states she narrates this particular hadith to Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Meaning, it is mustahab for women to narrate hadith. Number 3, he says, also the opposite, or specifically that it is permissible for a man to listen to the narration of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. It is permissible not only for a woman to narrate, but a man to listen to the discourse from her. Now this is important, because when you consider the culture of our communities, too often enough it flies in the face of what the reality of Islam is. And we will come back to this, inshallah. He continues. So he states, not only that, كَمَا يَجُوزُ عَكْسُهَا, it is also permissible to have the opposite. it is also permissible for a woman to listen to the discourse of a man. Now you get this from where? From the example of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. He continues. He states, Tasmiyatul mar'a. It is also permitted for a man to speak and to pronounce the name of the woman that he has heard this from. The fact that Jabir narrates from Fatima alayhi salam shows that he not only stood before her to listen to the entirety of this discourse, which takes us 10 minutes to recite, but he narrates her name and speaks about her name in particular. You can see here, the last point is, Sawt al-Ajnabiyya, that it is permissible for a man to listen to the voice of a na-mahram. It is permissible for a man to listen to the voice of a na-mahram. Here, Sayyid al-Marja al-Shirazi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, makes 6 points and says just from this one line, we can provide evidence and proof of the methodology of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. From permissibility of narrating, permissibility of a woman narrating, permissibility of the engagement between man and woman, and vice versa, permissibility of listening to the discourse from someone who is not mahram to you. Now here often, this is opposed by the culture of the community. And often, when we think about how our communities are structured, we will place our own restrictions that may not necessarily be directly in accordance with the very best thing of what we are trying to achieve. If you look at what's happening today and the way in which certain communities are, for example, you find within the Muslim community that women are not given place for prayer. You will have seen this. I'm not saying necessarily here, of course. In other mosques, this is often found within the media as to one of the reasons they point to about the misogyny or so-called misogyny in Islam, that there is a male supremacy, that women cannot even come to the masjid for Salat al-Maghrib or Salat al-Dhahr and so on and so forth. Why? Because there's not a space for prayer for individuals. Look at the methodology of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and how distanced certain Muslims have become from the truest methodology of Islam in itself. If you go, for example, to places of great historical culture of the Islamic sciences, go to places like Morocco, go to places like Iran, and you will see in their museums paintings hanging of the Imam of Jama'ah at the front, the men and the women immediately behind. And these go back several hundred years, these paintings. What does that show you? Throughout the history of the development of Islam, there has not been a prohibition on women coming to pray. Yet today, still there are certain masajid here in the UK, maybe in the United States, across, where women are not even feeling comfortable to be able to come to pray the Salat al-Maghrib, pray the Salat al-Dhahr, and so on and so forth. And so what this hadith does, this opening line does, make us revisit the way in which we understand these particular matters about the relationship between a woman and Islam, relationship between woman and narrator, relationship between woman and alima, relationship between woman and teacher within Islam, and makes us think about how we should be in accordance to the true example of Her Eminence Fatima az-Zahra salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. Now here, we look at point number 2 specifically. And we'll start with that and inshallah look at more points as the discussion develops. Sayyid al-Marja al-Shirazi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, states that number 1, this provides us proof that it is permissible to narrate hadith. Number 2, that it is permissible for a woman to narrate hadith to man. And so immediately we see a relationship between Jabir and Zahra alayhi salam. That Zahra alayhi salam was a teacher, not just to women, but to man as well. The famous hadith about Zahra alayhi salam being a teacher to a woman is the one that we often cite when it comes to the events of Fatimiyya and the martyrdom of Zahra alayhi salam. Famously, she's in her house. A woman comes to knock on the door and begins to ask question after question after question. A dozen questions pass, and the woman continues to get her answers one after the other, and there is no problem, there is no feeling of fatigue or frustration from Zahra alayhi salam. Towards the end, the woman says, I'm so sorry, I've been bothering you for so long, I've asked so many questions of you. Zahra alayhi salam responds by saying two things. Number one, this is my role. This is why I have been created, for the purpose of guidance towards humankind. Number two, have you ever seen an individual who is given a job and paid a very healthy salary to do that job? No matter how difficult that job is, even if they are made to walk up the highest mountains, the salary will encourage them to do that. My salary is not one that you can see in dunya. If you were to give everything in existence to me, it would still be less than the reward for one of the answers I have given to you out of this dozen that I have given to you. This was Zahra alayhi salam's attitude. Now, when it comes to women, she is a teacher. But when it comes to men, she is also a teacher. She invites Jabir and narrates the entire discourse of what happens in her family unit. Describes the entire incident to such an extent that Jabir is able to capture it verbatim and then to carry this forward to the others that he would eventually be part of in that chain of narration. What does this show us? It shows us the permissibility of a woman being a teacher to men and to man in general. Where is the misogyny in Islam? Where is the patriarchal system in Islam? That 1400 years ago this was the case, that a woman was a teacher to a man. I ask you a question, how many years ago was it only that a woman was allowed to vote here in this country? How many years ago was it that a woman was allowed to own her own property? How many years ago was it that a woman had these freedoms and these rights given to her? Whereas Islam made a teacher out of a woman to a man 1400 years ago. Now here when we see this, often the response is, yes, but it's an infallible Zahra alayhi salam. And of course for a woman to teach a man, if she's infallible, it's no problem. Or if you're a man that's in the presence of Her Eminence Zahra alayhi salam, it's no problem. We can't have a woman come and teach a man here today because, there will be hijab restrictions and so on and so forth. The reality is, Zahra alayhi salam is an infallible because of how she acted. And she gives us the archetype of how to act. Otherwise, she may as well just be a robot, and there's no point in you and I having Fatima alayhi salam, as an example. The fact that she was in control of herself, and she wasn't in denigrating thoughts, and Jabir wasn't in denigrating thoughts, proves that it is possible for the human being to be engaged with the opposite gender in the level of respect and love of humanity and discourse itself. This is why hijab is of several factors. There is the hijab of the eyes. There is the hijab of the heart. There is the hijab of the mind as well. The fact that we have a woman that is a teacher of a man shows us its permissibility. Then we have that person that says no because she's an infallible. If you look within the history books, again, this is very interesting. Last week, we looked at the biography of Jabir. One narration we didn't narrate, but I narrate to you tonight. In the year 40 after Hijrah, the great enemy of Ahl al-Bayt, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, tried to ransack Medina. He sent 3,000 troops to ransack and occupy Medina. When he did so, the head of that army that engaged in Medina, they went to the household of one of the great tribes of Medina by the name of Banu Salama. Banu Salama was a great tribe that looked after Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. The head of that army went to them and said, we will give you security from our ransack on the condition that you give up Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Jabir went to the house of the wife of Rasulullah, Salama, salamullahi alayha. Salama. Is Salama an infallible? No. Jabir, who yesterday was getting the narration of Hadith al-Kisa from Zahra alayhi salam, took refuge in that house, went to Salama, salamullahi alayha, and said to her, O Salama, this tribe looks like it's going to make an evil agreement with Muawiyah and his army. What do you recommend I do? She's not an infallible, but someone of his eminence like Jabir, a scholar, a narrator of hadith, someone who lived with 7 infallibles up until the 5th Imam alayhi salam, is asking for lesson from whom? From a woman. He is not infallible, she is not infallible. O Salama, it looks like they've sold me out. What do I do? She responds with some amazing advice. She says, O Jabir, the companions of the cave, Ashab al-Kahf, they wore a crucifix around them and engaged with their society out of taqiyya. Why? To act in a way which would save their lives. I recommend you do the same. Jabir went out and under taqiyya pledged a temporary allegiance to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan in order to save his life. Where did he get this from? Was it an imam? No. Was it an infallible woman? No. It was a woman that he went to and observed, asked, and got a correct answer in the eyes of what Islam would have wanted him to do. Imagine a companion of his eminence like Jabir, where he is entrusted with the salutation of Rasulullah, entrusted with Hadith al-Kisa, gives to us ziyarat Aminullah, gives to us as the first individual who goes on ziyarah al-Ba'iniyya, he is still going to learn from a woman. But in our society, here in our community, this is something that would be unthinkable, something that would be unheard of. Look at the difference. Islamic history, Islamic example, and many attitudes that run through until today. There's a huge disparity between the two. And this is something that we need to resolve. Now, in fact, if you look at throughout the history of Islam, women have often been teachers of men. For example, within the Sunni school of thought, one of the greatest teachers to have ever existed is a woman by the name of Karima al-Marzawiyya. She was the greatest narrator of Sahih al-Bukhari. She has the most number of ijaza, religious prescription, allowing her to narrate the entirety of Sahih al-Bukhari. And she taught hundreds of men Sahih al-Bukhari in the 11th century AD. Within the Shi'i tradition, greatest of scholars have been taught by women. For example, Allama Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. Sayyid Tabatabai, the author of Tafsir al-Mizan, one of the greatest mystics to have ever lived, he was taught jurisprudence by a woman. Why? Because there were going to be certain aspects, certain fields that him as a man may not be able to appreciate as good as a woman through first-hand experience. And so, whilst I may read the black and white text, it may be the reality of that may be something that escapes me unless I understand it through the perspective of a woman. What does this show us? This shows us the attitude of Islam and scholarship towards matters of a woman teaching us, and not to think that this is something problematic. In fact, we've already accepted it implicitly. Tonight, when you go home, turn on Ahlul Bayt TV. And what will you find? A sister presenting, a sister teaching, sister sitting opposite brother, talking, debating, analyzing, and you and I will sit and we will watch, and we will happily and gladly take a lesson from a woman. The question is how that builds into the structure of our community. How does that impact us today in the challenges that we have? In our communities, by and large, our communities are structured in a certain way. There is the managing committee, and then there is the resident alim. The resident alim is, by and large, a male. And so that role is male-dominated. A community, especially of larger size, with the level of challenges that our sisters and our youth face, it may be time for you and I to think that within our communities, there is not just a role for a resident alim, there is also a role for a resident alima. The question you will pose is, why do we need a resident alima? The answer is the same reason why you need a resident alim in the first place. Why do you need a resident alim? What's the reason? Every ship should have a captain. And the idea is that you have someone that takes responsibility for matters of jurisprudence, matters of direction, the thought process, the debate and discourse that is going to take place, someone that can be there for the youth, someone that can be there for matters of marriage and divorce, or whatever it may be. Is it that those challenges do not exist within the sisters? No, of course they exist. Some of them are going to be the same as within the brothers, and some of them are going to be very relative and specific to the sisters' challenges. You know, alhamdulillah, when we travel and you speak to people, you get a glimpse as to the kinds of challenges that are taking place, for example, within the sisters. Just to mention one or two. I hope they are still listening and with me. And when you go home tonight, it'll be interesting to see whether they agree with some of the things that we've heard or whether they disagree with some of the things that we've heard. As an example, just to show you, think about these things. I remember a sister was telling and saying, on our side in the ladies, amongst the challenges that we have, for example, we have mothers telling us today to our 9-year-old daughters, don't wear hijab. Don't wear hijab from the age of 9. Why? Because it will impact your chance of getting a suitor, a husband, if you wear hijab. It's true. Another one, don't go too deeply into religion, because no man wants to marry someone who's Mulyani. It's true. Sometimes, and again, I'm only relaying what is the challenges, the thought process, the problems within the community. For example, we have issues today where somebody will say, well, when we need to come to mosque, we feel like we need to dress up and we're on show because the aunties and people are going to be looking at us as to whether we're going to be married off to their grandchildren or not. You have challenges. What do we do with social media? What do we do when it comes to bringing our sisters up? The challenges that are specific to them. Sometimes it may be that a male counterpart, the resident alim, does not have access to those particular challenges. And so, in any community, we need a role model who has the ability to be within the sisters, to be able to help, bring up, debate, challenge, mold those particular issues that we are facing within today. Moreover, we find within our own challenges, for us as men to be able to accept the word from a woman. Are we ready to have that discourse? To allow us to be taught by a woman here? For us to have someone and to learn from them? Or is that something that we're still yet to bridge the gap to? These are the discourses, this is the challenge, these are the questions that you and I may want to pose. But I ask the question, if it is permissible for Jabir to stand in front of her eminence Zahra alayhi salam and learn from a woman, if it is permissible for Jabir to stand in front of Salama salamullahi alayhunna and learn from a woman, is there a prohibition from you and I learning from a woman? Can I read? Can I sit? Can I learn? Can I express? And so these are certain challenges that you and I may face in the next few years, in the next generation, as the next generation make this discourse and make this movement. His Eminence Sayyid al-Marja points out an interesting hadith which I want to conclude with. He says about the next point that it is permissible for a woman to narrate hadith and a man to hear that hadith, and for a man to be talking with someone who is ajnabiyya, someone who is na-mahram, someone who is of alien nature and not mahram to him. Sayyid al-Marja mentions a wonderful hadith, and I just want to mention it in light of hijab between man and woman, between the way in which Rasulullah was with the individuals of his own community, for you and I to think about and to take note, for you and I to take a lesson into. He mentions the following hadith. He says that when Rasulullah started teaching within his community, many of the women needed access to him. And many a time, either inside the Masjid al-Nabawi or outside Masjid Nabawi, he would meet on the road, and in the path he would meet sisters from his community. And so, sometimes it would be one-to-one, and sometimes it may be a larger gathering of women to this particular man, Rasulullah. The hadith states that Rasulullah would act in a certain way in order to ensure that the hijab was kept between men and women when they met. Think about this for you and I. When we meet outside, when there is gatherings at home, when there are weddings and there are family parties, when there are gatherings in these kinds of matters, how do you and I act? Rasulullah would meet with a woman individually or in a group. The narration says that if he happened to meet with a woman one-to-one and a man was passing by, if the matter was not a private discourse, Rasulullah would raise his voice slightly in order for the discourse to be heard, so that the man didn't think anything negative about the woman and didn't think negative about Rasulullah. How he kept his hijab. Or Rasulullah would invite the man to engage in the discourse, to prove there was nothing untoward taking place between man and woman. Look at the way in which Rasulullah thinks. Look at the way in which he understands social dynamic, and the way in which he keeps his own hijab, and the way in which he keeps the hijab of those passing around him. And to the extent that, of course, if there was a group of women around him, then this was something easier for him to be able to manage. Think about these things very carefully, and how Sayyid al-Marja has pointed out the intricacies of the relationship between man and woman in the Islamic context, when it comes to women narrator, when it comes to male listening, and when it comes to man learning from a woman, and how we might apply this in light of our own community and the challenges that we face and the discussions that we face today in our own time. Zahra alayhi salam was a teacher of men. Salama salamullahi alayha was a teacher of men. In the public discourse, what an example Zahra alayhi salam gave when she walked into the masjid of her father, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. As she walks in, she sees sitting on the pulpit is the first caliph, and standing by the side of the pulpit was the second. In the khutbah of Fadakiyya, the opening line of Zahra alayhi salam is "I'lamu anni Fatima." Know that I am Fatima. that should have been sufficient for anyone. That no other discourse, no other proof was needed after that to just state, I am Fatima, the one who is representative of God, the one who is the daughter of Rasulullah, the wife of the commander of the faithful. That is sufficient for my claim over Fadak that you have stolen and usurped from us. It was this Fatima that we remember when the door fell upon her. That when she is pregnant with her child Muhsin, that the enemies of Ahlul Bayt decided to ransack that house and to force the allegiance of Ahlul Bayt upon them. They surrounded her house. 300 men approached it. Unsheathed swords, sticks set alight, which eventually would set ablaze the door of Fatima. That door which Rasulullah, when he used to leave the city of Medina on expedition, would come to and say, peace and blessings be upon you, my daughter. And when he would return, he would first go to that particular house and say, peace and blessings be upon you, my daughter. It was after that door had fallen upon her and she had miscarried her child Muhsin that the same incident was remembered later on in the city of Medina. It was that woman that she was arrested by the caliph and the governor of the time for remembering that very same incident of Fatima az-Zahra. One of the companions comes running to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and says, "Oh my Imam, there is a woman who lies within the dungeons of the Caliph in Medina. Please pray for her that she may be released." Only a few days later, she was released. She comes to Imam al-Sadiq and says, "Oh my Imam, thank you for your supplication, your dua, remembering me in that jail." He asks, "What was it, O lady, O maid servant of Allah, that caused you to be arrested by the governor of the time?" She says that as I was walking on the pavement of Medina, I stumbled, I tripped and fell, but I fell awkwardly in such a way that I fell upon my chest, injuring myself. I remembered my grandmother Fatima az-Zahra, that when she was attacked, the door was pushed upon her, but there was a nail that was protruding out, that embedded itself into her chest, that broke her body, that made her miscarry Muhsin, that she called out, "Fizza, come to my aid." That Imams Hassan and Hussein, Zainab and Kulthum had to watch on as this incident took place. I remembered my grandmother Fatima and I called out to Fatima and I sent a curse upon the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. It was these enemies that captured me and took me into the jails. It was this very Fatima that we remember today, who is the narrator of Hadith al-Kisa. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-dhalimeen. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands. Let us join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the awaited Savior, to allow us to be alongside Him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world, to raise us from our graves so that we may partake in the victory of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those in a state of war and poverty and oppression, those in a state of homelessness, natural disaster and disease. Ya Allah, grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, help us to understand Hadith al-Kisa better, help us to implement its lessons and inshaAllah have ma'rifah of Hadith al-Kisa. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please conclude this discussion with a loud salawat in honor of Her Eminence, the Lady of Light, the leader of all women of the universe, Fatima az-Zahra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha.